Hello and welcome to the HR Book Club. This is the series where we meet the authors behind the very best HR books. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Michelle Parry-Slater. Hi Michelle, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on,
Good.
Leon.
No worries. So obviously we're here to talk about the Learning Development Handbook, but before we do, it'd be great if you could just introduce yourself to the audience.
So I run a small boutique consultancy, Kairos Modern Learning, and we specialise in helping organisations to move really away from just offering face-to-face learning and embrace the best of social and digital blending learning in order to be the most effective and efficient that they can be for their employees.
Fantastic. Okay, so tell us about the Learning Development Handbook. So I think we can probably guess a little bit who it's aimed at, but what's the book about? Give us a bit more information, please.
So it's here. I'd like to show
Yep.
it. It's broken into three parts, and it builds through a sort of a period of what do we need to think about in L&D in order to be more effective, more efficient, more enjoyable, more engaging in our learning development offer. It's particularly aimed at anybody who's got responsibility for L&D. So it might not be,
Okay.
an L&D manager, but it actually would guide you through. If you're a HR manager with learning responsibility, for example, and it was important to me that when I wrote it, that I aimed it at that kind of lone sole practitioner in an
Okay.
organization. So it can be the kind of guide on the side, so to speak, me in your pocket, whatever you want to talk about, which is why it's called a handbook. It's not necessarily something that you would read from cover to cover. It's something that you would pick up when you're thinking about, oh, I need to go and have a conversation with a stakeholder. There's a chapter on
I
stakeholders.
see.
It's that kind of opportunity, if you like, to have somebody sort of in your ear going, well, what could I think about when I go into that conversation? What could I think about when it comes to digital learning? What do I need to know about social learning? And I was really, really keen to write it in a very accessible way, because
Okay.
I've got loads of books on my shelf. I'm looking at them now. And when I have to read them all from cover to cover to get everything out of it, I find it quite daunting and overwhelming. And I'm a very busy person, 3 kids, dogs, all the rest of it. So I wanted to write a book that people could, in all honesty, sit down in an evening and read from cover to cover. So I wrote it short reads and long reads. If you just read
Hmm.
the short reads, you get the gist of what it's all about. But you could just sit and read that, in a few hours. That sort of plain journey type approach.
Yeah.
And then if you wanted to delve more into that subject, then you've got the long reads to go alongside that. I also put a load of lists and ideas and thinking questions in there so that people can dip in and out. So you may have read the chapter 4 months ago, what is that all about? Remind me of the thinking. So accessible, sort of on your desk, ready to pick up when you need it to, aimed at people who just want that support. It may well be you're a manager, actually. You don't have any responsibility
Mm.
for L&D other than your own people development of your own team. It would be useful for them as well.
Okay. I love the idea of the short read and the long read, depending on the, if you just need to get the highlights out of it and the key takeaways, you've got the short read, but if you really need to delve in more, you can do. So what sort of motivated you to write the book then?
Me, when I was that person, I used to be global head of learning in an organization, and prior to that, European learning manager, and so on and so forth. And I always just wanted somebody to just chat to, or, what should I do? That kind of thing. And it wasn't until I got a really fantastic manager, Catherine Marlowe, and her case study is in the book. She was excellent for me because she really brought me out of myself and made me realize the potential that I had in me. Not everyone has that. And so I wanted to write a book for people like me, who are L&D practitioners or managers of people, HR professionals that just want to be able to know, well, what could I do? What should I be thinking about? How could I go about that? So the book is intensely practical. It reflects my personality. I'm intensely practical in, it's all great to say we should all have wonderful learning management systems and learning experience systems, and we should have fantastic blended programs. But the reality for some people is they've got no money, they've got no resource, they've got no time. And so there's quite a lot of tips in the book about, what can you do in those sorts of circumstances as well. So I kind of wrote it for that lone L&D'er.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So how did you find the actual writing process? And did you enjoy the writing process?
Not at all.
Okay.
Really, really struggled with it. And I want to be honest about that, because people think that anyone who writes a book, they must be an expert or whatever. I may well know a lot about learning and development, but that doesn't mean to say I know a lot about writing it down. I could talk about it till the cows come home. I started my career as one of those sages on the stage, as one of those kind of face-to-face trainers. And so it put me in front of an audience, and I've got no problem chatting about it till the cows come home. Writing it down, getting a vocal voice into a written voice, even thinking about it now, Leon, you're giving me like, whoa, shivers, because it isn't easy to do something new. But that in itself, actually, I wrote about that in the book because I think it's important to realize for many people reading the book, some of the things that I suggest would be new for them, and therefore they will feel uncomfortable. And of course, we all know in L&D that we don't learn in our comfortable space. We learn when we stretch ourselves. So actually, the activity of writing it down, the discipline of it, starting with a white piece of paper, so daunting, but actually going through that process was a huge learning experience for myself, which I think actually made the book better, because I was literally, I was going to say walking the talk, but I wasn't talking. So I was walking the right. Is that even a phrase?
Yeah. Don't think so. Can be now. Fantastic. Okay. So given your experience of writing it, do you have ideas for other books going forwards, or maybe a second edition or something? Or
I don't think L&D stands still. So actually, the more conversations I have, the more practice that I do with my clients, yes, there are more ideas that are spilling out or honing the particular ideas. I'm running a monthly book club for the book, and it was just L&D practitioners coming together to discuss the chapter. I read the short read out, and then we talk about the chapter, and that throws up loads of ideas. And I keep saying in those book clubs every month, oh, I must put that in the second edition. I must put that in the second edition. So I think there's probably, if my publisher Kogan Page are so willing, in a few years' time, there may well be a second edition with updated views on where we are. I think the pandemic will have an impact on a longitudinal study in L&D. It was too soon, as I was writing it pre-pandemic and during pandemic, it was too soon to really make a call. So there's probably a second edition.
yeah.
But putting myself through that process for a new topic, not so sure. We'll see. Never say never.
Yeah, okay. So we always end our book clubs with a recommendation, and I always try and make sure we get only one, because everyone gets tempted to name and list off quite a few. So if I could press you to say, if there was one book that you would recommend to a fellow HR or L&D professional, what book would that be, Michelle?
That is a tricky one. When you talk to me about there being one recommendation, there's so many good people that I want to name check, not least Andy Lancaster, David Hayden, Stella Collins. But the book I choose is this one. This is Amy Brand, Make Your Brain Work. Amy Brand is a really good friend now. I've worked with her a few times, but you can see by all of the kind of tickets and things in this, it's one of those books that's hugely accessible, and it's the first book I ever read that made neuroscience make sense. And I think as an L&D practitioner, I was always a little bit scared of it, because I thought I need to know this stuff, but actually, how do I know it? And this is the book that really helped me understand a little bit more about how the impact of what we do in learning actually lands in people's minds, and how they can translate that to real work. So that's my recommendation.
Fantastic, lovely. Well, thank you very much for joining us and telling us all about the Learning and Development Handbook. And hopefully we might see you maybe on Hosting HR at some point in the future, maybe again. But yeah, best wishes with the company and with the book.
Thanks very much, Leon.